So this stream I wanted to present this Roland TR-808 which I got earlier in lockdown this year. This 808 has a little bit of history attached to it. It's got this sticker on that I love which says Musikmüller from Bern. So it was originally sold in Switzerland and there it seemed to stay for a while, and it was bought by an Italian producer who lived in Berlin, and he used to use it for making techno and acid stuff. And then he moved back to Milan, and during his move, he sold it to me, basically, in London. So it's been in Bern, I presume, other parts of Switzerland, Berlin, and London, and now it's with me. So the 808, when I got it, was in pretty good condition generally. There were a couple of issues. So these buttons, some of them were quite sticky. So I replaced the buttons with a new set, which I got on eBay. And you can tell because the white buttons here are a slightly different color from the originals. The originals are more like a kind of cream, whereas a bit more like the labels, whereas this is bright white. But I don't mind because it works perfectly, and I'm not kind of looking for complete originality. Also, some of these orange knobs had the orange part had fallen off, so they're just held in by a very thin layer of plastic, and they do come out quite often. So I was looking for solutions, and it's not a great solution, but people sell these little stickers that go in, which are the right color. Actually, they're a very good match. The originals are plastic, and it's only in 4 of them that I've put the sticker, and it looks pretty good against all the others. So this Roland originally was released in 1980, and it was kind of a revolution when it came out. It bridges the gap between what came before in the 70s, which was more like rhythm beatboxes for organ players to have accompaniment, to being a programmable drum machine. So it does have some of those kind of early electronic drum sounds, but it has this XOX 16-step programming interface that people still make drum machines with today. It doesn't really sound like realistic drums. Although it was at the height of technology when it came out, it quickly became not at the height of technology, and it became quite cheap, which is when hip-hop, rap, and electro producers kind of started to buy it in second-hand shops. And from that point on, it's always been incredibly cool. Something about the sounds are retro and futuristic at the same time, and they never really seem to go out of fashion or out of date. They'll always be cool. And there's something very special when I start to use it, you'll hear it, about the machine. It has its own groove, and it's apparently due to the different running of the tempo and CPU clock, which means that when it goes from step to step, it's not always exactly the same length. On average it is, so it stays in time, but individual steps may drift, which gives it a real groove. And the other thing about it is all the circuits fully analog, and by now the circuits are quite old. So every time it plays, like one of the sounds like the cowbell, for example, it sounds a bit different to the last time that it played the cowbell. So there's a lot of movement in the sound, and it never really gets boring to listen to it. I do actually have rhythms programmed in all of the 12 rhythm parts. So it's actually got quite a lot of memory. You can store up to 8 fills. So you've got the white ones are fills, and you can switch fills between A and B. And then you've got 12 patterns for normal drums, which have 2 parts, and you can also have on top of that A and B variations, or you can have A and B running together. So what that means is each of these 12 can either be a 1 or 2 bar pattern plus a 1 or 2 bar variation, or they can be one whole 4 bar pattern, and that's the configuration I like to use. But if you listen to those electro classics, like from Egyptian Lover, you'll quite often hear that they use a 2 bar loop. And that's and then they either use the variation or they go between both of those two parts. I've also got this thing, which is an Electro Harmonix crash pad, which makes super cool electro sounds, and I'll be triggering that from the 808 as well. I've got the Korg SQ-1 analog sequencer, which I've got sequencing the Yamaha CS-1, so maybe I can show you how you'd sync those and make a bass line. At the end, I've got the 303 back there. But let me play a couple of the beats that I've already got stored just to whet your appetite. So here's the first one. Here's a 4 to the floor pattern that I did. The 808 is actually pretty reasonable for jamming. Although you only have these 12 patterns, they are all 4 bars long, so that's good. And these fill patterns give you a lot of value as well. Also, what's quite cool on the 808 is these little pots for the volume. They're quite loose, and I've seen an interview with Egyptian Lover where he says that they were always quite loose, even new. I guess it's the type of pot that Roland decided to use. But all you have to do is give them a little flick, and you can mute and unmute sounds, and it goes very nicely, actually. Here, I'll do it with the cowbell. The outputs I've got connected are the main output, which is having reverb applied from my Zoomar FX300 like normal, and the kick drum has its own output going into the mixer without reverb, and I haven't touched the EQ. That's really just the sound of the 808 kick drum. And the 808 kick drum can get quite uncontrollable. When you watch videos of people who talk about the 808, they always say how much bass the kick drum has, and I always thought to myself, yeah, I've used Rebirth, I've used 808 emulators, my other drum machines have 808 sounds, but when you get the real thing, the bass drum is quite different to all the emulations. And it can get quite out of control, and it's so warm as well. I don't know if that is coming across on the stream or not. Let's make a beat. In order to do that, I first have to adjust this pattern mode wheel. It's not actually, it's called the pattern right wheel, and I adjust it all the way anti-clockwise to the pattern clear position. And then I am on the pattern I want to erase, which is pattern 12, and then I just press this little red push button here to clear the track. And you can see that it's flicking between A and B. If I just wanted to erase A, I could have it on A. If I just wanted to erase B, I'd have it on B. And you can see these lights here switch between first and second part as it's erasing. So it's erasing both parts of the drum pattern. So the patterns go like this. So first of all, it plays the first part, variation A. Then it plays the second part, variation A. Then it plays variation B first part, and then variation B second part. And you program each of those parts manually. And there's no copying between patterns, which is a bit annoying, but I think it's not so bad. So I'll start by making the first bar. So I'll switch to variation A, and the pattern write switch is now on first part. So I need to select an instrument, and I'll start with the bass drum. So that's a couple of bass drums loaded, and I can insert an accent by changing this instrument select wheel to AC, which is accent. And I like, when I'm doing break beats, I like to put the accent on 8th note intervals, and when I do 4 to the floor, I just like to have it on the beat. Now you'll hear there is a difference in the sound already. Now the 808 is a bit different to the 707. So when you have accent on the 707, it just makes the sound louder. But on the 808, what it does is it actually changes the sound. And you can hear there the kick drum's louder and longer when it has the accent on. Let's add some electro sounding closed hi-hats. That sounds pretty cool already. Let's do an open hi-hat. Another restriction is that you can only program in step time whilst it's running. There's also a funny tap mode for doing real-time drum programming, and I don't really use it, but what you can do is tap this button here, and then while it's playing, it will insert the selected instrument. So it's kind of like just having a one drum pad that you assign. And I saw the Egyptian Lover does use this for programming in different instruments. Perhaps I'll have a go with that later. Okay, I think it needs a snare drum. So I'm rotating the instrument select to the snare. You do have some controls with the snare drum. There's tone and snappy, and I'll tweak those whilst it's playing so you can hear. So the tone is controlling the fixed frequency behind the drum. And the snappy controls how much noise is mixed into it. The bass drum has a tone control, which is more of a low pass filter, and it has obviously the famous delay control as well. The whole mix is running through Alesis Nanocompressor, which is under all of this stuff here. I think it probably needs a hand clap now, which is CP on the instrument select wheel. You can't do anything to adjust the hand clap, but you can change it into a maracas. But I generally prefer the hand clap. Let's do the famous cowbell, and I'll do it Egyptian lover style using the tap feature here. Yeah, I do like that. But the Egyptian lover doesn't actually often use the cowbell. So one of the tricks that the Egyptian lover does is that rather than having the cowbell sound, there are actually 3 trigger outputs of the back of the 808. So one of them is the cowbell, which you know is probably the least useful instrument, so people quite often use that as the trigger. But you also have a trigger on the clap and a trigger on the accent. Because the accent happens at regular intervals, I've got the accent trigger connected to the SQ-1 for later. Let's take the trigger out of the cowbell, and then rather than using that as a trigger, I've just connected the trigger directly to the mixer. Now the voltage is quite high, so I'm going to start with the volume being quite low. And I'll turn off the cowbell on the volume here. And yeah, it gives that kind of click sound, which I think is super cool. Let's hear the beat so far. But that's not all we can do with the trigger output. So I have the Electro Harmonix crash pad. So I've got the cowbell trigger on this white wire going into the crash pad, and if I press this button on the crash pad, you can hear the sound of it. Yes, this when you listen to Egyptian Lover, he has this kind of zap sound that sounds like that, and you know it's in Kraftwerk and a load of other electro as well. And I was always wondering how they did that, and I think Egyptian Lover programmed his zap sound using a SH-101. At least that's what equipment he had in his studio. And I do have the Behringer clone of the SH-101, which I could use for a high Q zap sound, but I thought there must be some other way to get the zap, the high Q. And I found, by looking at a load of videos online, I looked at videos for, there's a Boss percussion synth pedal, which is quite good, but it doesn't do a high Q zap. There is also a few different Electro Harmonix pedals. There's a Space Drum, which is quite good, but I think the Boss percussion synth is better. And there is the crash pad, which is meant to simulate cymbals, like that. But it has a resonance control, and when you turn that up, maybe not all the way, but about 3/4 or 2/3, that's when you start to get the high Q, and you adjust the length, and you get the amazing electro high Q sound perfectly, basically. It has expression pedal input, which I've never tried, and it's got an auxiliary in and a trigger in. And there's also a sensitivity button to change the trigger voltage, but with the 808 it works fine on either setting. So that's the Electro Harmonix crash pad. I definitely recommend it. It sounds perfect with the 808. Let's listen to the beat so far then. It's going well. I need to come up with a second bar though. Like I said, it eats A part 1, part 2, and then B part 1, part 2. So I'm going to flick to pattern right first part to pattern right second part. And you have to say how long you want the second part to be, which seems a bit weird. But actually, it's an incredibly cool feature if you don't want to do a 4 to the floor pattern. So you'll have your first 16 steps of the first part, and then from 0 to 16 steps of the second part. So you could do like a shuffle pattern or a waltz or something really well without needing to make it too short. And that is something I wish modern drum machines have, because normally on a modern drum machine you can have 16 steps or less, but in this case you have from 16 to 32 steps, which is so good, really. So I want to have the full 16 steps in the second part. So you press the pattern clear button, and then you select the length, which I want to be 16. There you go. The pattern has to be playing when you do that. Now there's no copy on this thing, so I keep having to switch the pattern right wheel between first and second part. Cool. So our 1 bar pattern is now 2 bars. And a lot of electro producers back in the day would have been happy with that, but I am not happy with that. So I'm going to switch to the B variation, and then I can quickly program that as well. Right, so we've got 3 bars done now. That's pretty good so far. I'm going to add some conga sounds. So how these switches work is that the middle 5 sounds here, which are the 3 toms and the rim shot and the hand clap, they have an alternate voice, right? Which is a Latin voice. So the hand clap can become maracas, which I showed you before. The rim shot can become claves, which I really like the clave sound. I think it's fantastic. And the toms can all become congas, and I like the conga sounds, and I normally have it switched to that. So let's just, I don't know, I'll randomly tap some congas in using the tap button here. that's the toms done. So let's, I'll show you the difference between the conga and the toms. So at the moment, we have the congas. That's the congas. And that's the toms. But I do like those congas quite a lot. Let's add a rim shot as well whilst we're in here. So that's the rim shot, and I'll play you the clave sound as well. That's the clave. And that's the rim shot. I think the rim shot for this beat sounded quite good. So the last instrument that I've not shown you yet is the cymbal, which I'll do now. The cymbal is another one where you have some analog controls. You can adjust the tone of the cymbal and decay, which means you can kind of go from a crash cymbal to more of like a ride cymbal. So that's the cymbal. The open hi-hat has a delay control. Let's try that. I like a nice long decay on the hi-hat, and you can tune the toms. So that is basically the 808 in a nutshell. And now I'm going to add extra instruments and try and make it into a complete track. And to do that, I've got the accent out, which as we know is on 8th notes, and it is connecting to the sync input of the Korg SQ-1 here. Right, that's the 808 muted, but it is still triggering its accent out on this sync cable into the SQ-1. So the SQ-1 will play in sync with the 808, and I want to program some kind of, I don't know, synth line, bass line, I suppose, using the SQ-1. It's connected to the Yamaha CS-5, which is lurking in the background here. So that's the bass line from the CS-5 being triggered from the SQ-1, which is being synced to the 808. That sounds quite nice. So there we go. Let's get the 303. Now, handily, the 808 has a DIN sync 24 input or output. So I've got it set to output, and then I can just plug it straight into the 303. I could use the mix in on the 303. It's actually a really good idea. Let me do that. Mix the zap, the high Q zap, with the there we go. Right, I need to tune the 303 with the Yamaha. Let's get these in tune. I think that will do for the tuning. Right, brilliant. Let's make a couple of special patterns for this with this track. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Let's program a second 303 pattern now, because I feel like it does need a bit of a second 303 pattern. This 303 is one that I picked up on eBay. Actually, it was broken when I first got it. But I did think at the time, as I was buying it, well, this is quite affordable for a 303, and I can probably fix it. And in the end, that is what happened. I did actually manage to fix it. There we go. There's a little jam. I think probably I need to tune the 303 and the CS-5 again. But that's working quite well, isn't it? And I'm pretty happy. Thanks everyone for joining. I think it's been a decent stream. I wanted to show off the 808 and how cool it is. And we've also got the CS-5 and the 303, which is also a good thing. And showing off this crash pad for making those high Q zaps